start recording. All right.
And I guess I will add one thing. It is very funny seeing a bunch of old faces from UCLA right now. So hi, everyone.
All right, Pavan, you're next.
I thought by alphabetical order it should be Mignon, but okay, I'll go.
I messed it up.
Okay, so I'm Pavan. I am from the class of 2018, so I started here in 2014. I finished my master's last year, and I've continued on for my PhD under Professor Vani Roy Chowdhury. Fun fact about me, I love string instruments, and I've been playing them for about 15 years now. Yeah.
Yeah. Mignon, you're next.
Just click in the bottom left of your screen. If like you move your mouse.
Okay,
yeah.
I got it. Okay, I'm Mignon. I graduated in 2017. I'm currently pursuing my master's in EE in an online program at USC. I'm sorry. They were the only ones taking applications at the time I applied. But I'm doing that part-time while working full-time at Raytheon, and my employer it reimburses me for a portion of my tuition. So I guess I'm offering diversity and options in grad school.
Yep. All right, Cassie, you're up.
Hi, I'm Cassie. I am also working full-time while pursuing a master's online. I currently work in the electrical engineering area of the Aerospace Corporation in El Segundo, California. I'm going to UCLA in the online master's program in systems engineering. And I graduated from Harvey College with a degree in engineering in 2015. And I took a couple of years break before applying to the master's program. One interesting fact about me is every day in college, I would free line to class. And if you don't know what that is, you can Google it, and it's pretty cool, in my opinion, although some people think it's nerdy.
All right, Erica, it's your turn.
Hi, my name is Erica Skoglund. I graduated UCLA Electrical Engineering in 2013. I then went to Texas Instruments and joined in their technical sales and marketing program and worked at TI for 5 years. When I left, I was the worldwide account manager for HP. I left TI to go get my MBA at Wharton, where I went full-time, and I just wrapped up my second year. So I am recruiting for jobs right now, but wanted to be more involved on the business side.
Very cool. All right, Alan, you're up.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
So my name is Alan. I graduated electrical engineering from UCLA in 2010. Then went on to do medicine. So I went to UCLA for medical school. Graduated 2014, and then stayed on for internal medicine residency. Graduated 2017 for medicine residency. Went into cardiology. I'm currently in my last year cardiology fellowship. So it's been a 15 year haul, but it is very rewarding. One fun fact about me is I'm going to steal this. I'm actually Frank Quo's brother, who's also on the line. He also graduated electrical engineering, and he'll talk to him more about himself as well. Okay.
All right, Frank, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, my name is Frank Quo. I'm Alan's older brother. I graduated EE in 2008 and went on to medical school also at University of Miami. I finished my radiology residency at UCLA just this past year, and currently I'm at Stanford doing my fellowship in neuroradiology. I guess my brother stole my interesting fact, but I guess we have very similar sounding voices. You guys all can hear.
All right, Chris, your turn.
Hello, I'm Chris. I graduated last year with my BS, and currently I'm still at UCLA for the MS PhD program. And my advisor is Professor Frank Chang, and so he's just recently got back. But one interesting fact is, I guess, that I run. Yeah.
Yep. Last but not least, Pong, you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Pong. I also graduated from UCLA last year for my BS, and now I'm still in UCLA doing my master's program. Fun fact about me, I actually used to be a workshop chair in HKN, so shout out to workshop chair.
Yep. And then for the video, Ethan, who is currently doing his PhD at Stanford, Professor Williams, and Professor Mehta are also on the line. Okay, so the first thing that we will be doing, so if you guys have any questions, just raise your hand, and one of the moderators, either me, Jillian, Nico, or Natalie will call on you. Yeah, and the first thing that we will do is just have all the panelists just share why they decided to take the path they took and deciding to go to grad school, and what their experience applying was like. So whichever panelist will want to go first.
I guess I can go first. The answers to that when I applied and right now are very different. So at the time I applied, it was because everyone was pressuring me to, like my parents, my workplace, they were all saying, if you don't do it now, you'll never go back and do it. So I think in the back of my mind, I did want to learn more, but I guess I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then my point of view now is that in the route that I took, where I'm working full-time and doing a master's part-time, I'll have both of those in 4 years. So by the time I finish, I will have a master's degree and 4 years of experience. And in industry, a master's is kind of equivalent to about 2 years of experience. So it's kind of like condensing effectively 6 years of experience into 4. And kind of in the same pathway, having your master's does open a lot more doors for you. So those are my 2 reasons.
I guess I could go next. So I decided to continue from my BS straight through to the PhD program, partly because as an undergrad, I was involved in research in my current lab. And so for me, it just ended up being a pretty easy transition. And a lot of people also were talking about how if you plan on doing a PhD, just start it immediately. But because once you go to industry, it's going to be really hard for you to come back and spend 5 to 7 or maybe more years at school full time. And I guess I wanted to do the PhD because I enjoyed the research aspect while I was here at UCLA in undergrad, and so I wanted to continue doing that.
I guess I'll go first. So the reason why I'm doing masters is because I feel like after I graduated, or like towards my senior year in undergrad, I feel like I don't really know what I wanted to do, and I don't really have like a specific path or a very clear goal that I want to go into. So I just wanted to learn more. That's why I applied to grad school. Also, if you're UCLA undergrad, there's this really good program called ASAP, which basically guarantees you to get into the master's program if you have good grades, basically. So that's why I also did it. Thank you.
Yep. Also, to avoid awkward silences, I'm gonna start calling on people.
Wait,
So-
I think Professor Williams has his hand raised.
Oh yeah,
So Professor Williams.
Professor Williams.
Okay. So I was actually a physics undergrad at a small liberal arts school. So I used grad school to sort of switch topics. I realized I wanted to get into electrical engineering, and I ended up only being half successful. But you know, I was doing undergraduate research, and basically I realized I liked that a lot and wanted to find a way to keep doing it. And so that's sort of been the guiding principle of, as I was going through grad school, it was always that the path I took was led by, well, I like the research and the process of doing research. Grad school is the obvious next thing, and then postdoc's the next thing, and then faculty seemed to be the way to go, that I could keep doing that thing I liked. But I would also say that grad school, if you're thinking of switching, you know, vectors, you know, your direction, the transition time after undergrad is a very natural time to do it. And people switch from different, you know, you don't have to go to grad school in EE. And the fact that there's a lot of people on this call who have switched, you know, out of EE is testament to that.
I can speak with regards to the medical aspect. So in terms of medicine, I mean, a lot of people ask Frank and I why we decided to go into medicine. Unlike some, I mean, I definitely have a lot of friends who, after going through EE, they decided to continue on to grad school because they wanted to learn more, or they just didn't know exactly which path they wanted to take. Medicine is something that you have to know that you want to do it, because it's a very long path for people that are considering it. It is very rewarding. The reason why I went into it, I've always thought about medicine versus engineering. I always thought that I was going to apply to like biochem, for example, when I was applying for college. And then I took AP Computer Science in high school, and that gave me an identity crisis. We liked it. I liked engineering. Frank went through engineering. He's 2 years above me, so he joined the UCLA for double E starting, and I learned from him that it's possible to do double E, and then basically decide later on if I wanted to do double E as a career or go into medicine. So in a way, I chose double E as like, because it was my interest, but I didn't know if that was what I want to do with the rest of my life. But I took an internship. I enjoyed it, but for just something I felt was missing. I wanted to be, I don't know. I wanted to explore more the medical aspect of things. I was interested in when I was younger, so I started volunteering, doing those things, and then that one thing led to another, and then I decided to go into medicine. And because of my technical background in electrical engineering, I mean, I chose cardiology because it's very logical, everything about the heart. So yeah.
Great. I can go next. I will in some sense echo Pong. Thank you for bringing your perspective, because that's very similar to mine. After I finished my undergrad, I had no idea what I was doing, and we had the that option of doing the master's program straight away. So the least effort path was to do the master's program. And then when I was doing my master's, my advisors told me to apply to the PhD, and when they say to do something, you do something. So I did that, and then sort of the least inertia path was to continue on to do a PhD. That's how I ended up in a PhD. After my PhD, somebody recommended that I send an email to a faculty member for a postdoc, and I did, and it took me on. So there we go again, another low effort path. So I've sort of been going to the blue system, and at one point I realized that luckily it was after what I would have done had I found out that it was not, but I didn't really have any good reasons for doing any of this, and that may not be the right option for many of you.
So I'll represent the business school side of things. I knew coming out of electrical engineering that although the classes were interesting, I didn't want to go do design. And so going into technical sales, I knew I liked working with people, and being in sales allowed me to really see how a lot of different companies worked and worked with various industries and companies. And so that made me realize that I actually want broader experience. I don't need to stay as technical, but I'd like to understand why company like business operations, strategy, and product development. And so for me, about 5 years in was the logical time to make that step. And business school is really a very good stepping stone to allow you to pivot into anything you want to do. So that was why I made the decision to go.
Alrighty. So I made the choice to go to graduate school. I think the best way to explain it would be sort of as a choice against the alternative. So I had a job slated for Raytheon, and I was going to do the master's program. But then in my last couple of years, the master's online. The last couple of years, I found a set of problems that I thought would be very interesting to continue pursuing. And so that's the reason why I decided to call my work last minute and cancel my accepted job offer and to apply to graduate school instead, which I don't recommend doing, by the way.
My scenario when I when I had the choice to make between going to graduate school or finding a job, like Ethan was also, he had the same choice in front of him, it seems. I asked myself whether I could have whether I wanted the freedom to work on any problem that I found interesting. And it seemed likely that this was one of the few scenarios where that's possible. I have friends who joined the industry after their bachelor's, but it looked a lot like they were doing they were solving a specific problem, and they were pursuing that problem over and over again. And some people do really well at it. I just didn't think that was for me. And so in order to try new things, and going back to Professor Williams' argument of wanting to pivot and having the freedom to pivot for a longer duration of time, that's why I chose to pursue the PhD track. Thanks.
All right, Frank, if you haven't already gone, you're up.
Okay, so when I entered EE in 2008, I know that options are different now, but when I entered, there were pretty much 3 tracks: the biomedical track, the straight EE track, and like the computer science track. And at that time, I kind of just did the straight EE. And then I know this sounds kind of funny, but my ex-girlfriend kind of convinced me to do medicine because she was pre-med. So I was like, okay, I'll switch to biomed. And then in case like I don't get into medical school, EE will kind of be like a backup. And I've always liked engineering, math, and physics. Our grandfather was double E. And, like truly enjoy my classes in EE. I actually took some grad classes too while as an undergrad. And I think it was like a good choice because in case like I wasn't gonna be able to do medicine, I feel like EE gives a lot of options for different things. Like a bunch of my friends actually went into consulting, law school, and business school. But yeah, so I went through with it, got into medical school, and I'm a radiologist, which is very technical. We do a lot of MRI physics. I read a lot of studies. There's a lot of technology involved, and it's actually very handy related to EE. And I've used my engineering skills a lot too in medicine. I've done a lot of bioinformatics research, programming, yeah.
All right, thank you for all for sharing your perspectives. Now we will transition into a time of Q&A about just graduate school admissions, life, and just all of that. So if we could just kick that off with Professor Williams, if he can just give his opinion, what they look for in applications.
Well, okay, I really do want to talk about applications, but actually I have a question for some of the other panelists. You know, one of the big questions that I get from students I'm advising who are mulling over, should I go to grad school or not? And it's usually not students who are dead set on PhD, but more they're like, should I go into industry or should I get a master's? And it would be helpful to hear from the people in industry now or in business, what's the value? And obviously this varies field by field, but you know, what is the value added for getting the master's right away versus waiting or not at all?
So I can give my take on that. I waited 2 years to apply, and so when I started, it was like 2.5 years since I graduated undergrad. And let me tell you, I got used to being able to go home and not have homework. And so going back to grad school and like putting aside time to study and do homework assignments and do readings was like the hardest transition to go back to school. And like, that was like the hardest thing for me to do, to wait. But I'm glad that I did wait because I think it gave me like a refreshed perspective on grad school. I work in like the technical side of my company, but we also do a lot of like more like consulting and program management as well. But I think if I didn't have this perspective of how industry works, I would have just wanted to do a more technical EE master's. And that might have not have been the right fit for me. And now I know more about myself, and like I realized that I want to go more into program management than a straight technical degree. And so that's why I actually applied to UCLA online program for the EE program, but then I switched to systems engineering. So I pivoted a little bit. And so far it's been going well.
So I think I have the opposite scenario of Cassie, where she works in electrical engineering and she's pursuing a master's in systems engineering. Is that right? And so I'm working as a systems engineer, but I'm pursuing my master's in electrical engineering. And I think that I just got super lucky because as Pavan said, when you work in industry, you don't really have a lot of choice in what kind of problems you work on. And also, like in my industry in particular, you don't really get to work on technical engineering problems because for aerospace, a lot of our contracts are really based off of sustaining existing systems or more towards managing logistics of programs or products rather than the real development of a system. So on my industry side of my time, I spend half of my time supporting one of these programs where I'm just like making slides to educate our customer on the way our systems work or they have questions. But on the other side, I get to work on research and development type of projects, and those opportunities are super few and far between. So I got really lucky in being able to work on something like that. As far as going into getting a master's, it's for my industry, they're very supportive of me pursuing a master's. So I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So I take every Wednesday off just so that I have like a really short week and a mini weekend in between. And I feel like it goes very hand in hand with the research and development projects I am working on, because they're related and I'm more of a hands-on learner. So I really did not do well in undergrad because it was just so abstract. But when you see the problems that you're actually working on in real life, and then you see the same equations in textbooks and you're trying to implement some of these in code, you're like, oh, I've seen this before. This is that thing we were just learning last week. So I think that really reinforces your ability to retain that information.
On the business school side, I think they, like, most top programs look for like 3 to 5 years of work experience before you apply to come back. And part of what is evaluated is what your work experience is, what leadership you've demonstrated. And so applying wasn't really an option right out of undergrad. I think that an MBA prepares you. There's like 3 main tracks that people go right out of an MBA. You can go into consulting, you can go into just about any aspect of finance. A lot of people go into tech companies as technical PMs or strategy. If you want to start a company, you have great connections to venture capital and resources to do that. So it really prepares you in the short term for those types of roles, and in the long term to be in a C-suite type position.
Any so
I have something to add here.
okay.
So one thing that I want to say for immediately pursuing a master's, because I had a similar question of whether I want to start working or go into a more academic route immediately starting. I asked myself, again, the master's program is great, and Mignon, you were mentioning that you get to see it in practice and in courses, and that kind of reinforces your abilities to appreciate what you learn. Yes, and that's an amazing point of view. Also, it's just that if you can finish your master's early on, then the amount of experience that you can get after you finish your master's perhaps would be of a higher quality, because now you can get jobs that require more master's oriented thinking if you're interested in research and development, which it seems like many master's and PhD jobs are meant for. Now, I understand there are many ways of tackling it, and but this is just my way, my thinking as I was applying to grad school. I was asking myself, should I apply later with more experience, with a higher chance of getting into school? And should I weigh that against trying to get into a master's program right now and getting the experience later when I can work on things that I think I'll be more successful at? So I think that's the balance that I had to draw in terms of whether to prepone or postpone my master's.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just stopping at a master's and you're deciding between going into industry first or doing your master's first, it is definitely super difficult to go into working in industry where you don't have to go, like, you go home and you have all this free time versus going home and having to study for your next exam or to watch a lecture or to do homework. And I feel like even after summer break where I get the free time and then the school year picks up again, that transition is hard. And if you've been out of school for a whole year, I imagine that's just way harder.
I will add too that if you do your master's part-time while working, it will take longer. It'll be a lot more drawn out versus going back to school full-time. Full-time, a master's takes 9 classes. And so with the quarter system at UCLA, I mean, you could finish that within like a year and a half if you really force yourself. But I'm taking one class at a time. And I took like 2 classes 1 quarter, and like that was kind of a lot. And so it's going to take me like 2 or 3 years. So that's something that you want to keep in mind too. It's like, what kind of quality of life do you want to like go down? Do you want to go down like the hard and fast route where you have to take so many classes but you have to get it done really fast? Or do you want to like still have some fun and like live a little bit while juggling work and a little bit of school?
Yeah, USC's master's program is also 9 classes, but we're on the semester system. So I take 1 class at a time, which means it's drawn out to being 4 years as opposed to 1 or 2 years. But I mean, it's a choice.
Okay, if maybe I'll jump back in because you originally asked me some questions about admissions, and so maybe it'd be helpful for everyone, particularly the students, to hear just some of the basics. Especially, I think people are not necessarily exactly aware about what the different tracks are, MS versus PhD, and the different types of masters. Obviously, this will be more like sort of ECE centric now, or engineering centric. It doesn't so much apply to medical or business. So I'll use UCLA as an example. So UCLA, there are essentially 2. Well, you can apply to masters only or MS PhD. Okay, and so MS PhD, in some sense, they're the same process. You would always, but you're declaring, if you apply for MS PhD, you're basically declaring your intent that you want to eventually get a PhD, even though you would still go through the same degree requirements. You have to get your master's first, you have to take the courses. It's just when you are admitted, you will be evaluated in a different group, okay? Because the universities sort of look differently at students that are they're intending to go on for PhD and ones that are planning to stop for the master's, for the simple reason that the heart of the PhD experience is research. I mean, you do classes first, but what makes a PhD is the research you do, and to do that, you have to be in a research group. And that's sort of a second part that I think some students, particularly in the US, are not always aware that when you're applying for the MS PhD track, your job is not just to get admitted, but it's to get admitted and find a research group to go into. Now, sometimes that doesn't happen until after you're at the school, but often it does. It's happening while you're applying, and you don't necessarily realize it. I didn't realize it as an undergrad exactly, because I was coming from a non-research based school, so I was a little bit unaware. And some of the questions students ask me during advising shows that not everyone is aware of it. Whereas if you're applying for just a master's, you're not going to be looked at as a potential researcher in somebody's lab by the professors. So your application will be viewed in a different way. And even on the master's track at UCLA, there's 3 different ways you can get your master's. There's basically a courses only master's. There's a courses plus a project, which is like 2 quarters in somebody's lab. And then there's a thesis-based master's, which is where you are doing research in somebody's lab most of the entire time, and then you write a thesis at the end. And that thesis option is important if you intend to go on for your PhD. You want to have some research experience as your master's, because some students don't get admitted directly into the PhD program, but they still want to do it. So their strategy is, hey, I'm going to come for the master's, I will volunteer, I'll get in someone's lab, prove myself, and then hopefully they will make me an offer to be in their lab and support me for their PhD. Oh, and this is also something I should say, is that when I say get in someone's lab to be the PhD and be supported, that means financial support. In the sciences and engineering, you should not be, you will be paying for your own master's if you're stopping at your master's. But if you're doing PhD, you should not be paying for your own PhD. It's a bottomless money pit. Okay, you don't know when it's going to stop. So your goal, once you get past your master's, your goal, and sometimes even as you're going right after bachelor's, if you're on a research track, you want to be funded by the professor who's going to have you in their lab. Either that, or you bring your own money in the form of a fellowship, like an NSF fellowship, a defense fellowship, or you're being paid for by your company or the military or something. But unless you are really wealthy independently, you should not be financing your own PhD.
Thank you, Professor Williams. Just so you guys know, Cody and I are going to switch it up here a little bit, and I'm going to be taking over asking questions and kind of stimulating the conversation. Hopefully, Professor Williams, that kind of overview maybe brought people to want to ask some questions. So right now, if anyone has a question in particular that they'd like to ask, I see Professor Mehta actually has his hand raised. Professor Mehta, if you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah, I think I want to add a little bit. I think Ben put it. I don't know if my internet may be terrible, so I may be cutting in and out. Hopefully, you guys can still hear me. I don't want to reiterate what Ben said. I completely agree. I think he made some very good points. I think there's one sort of like slant that I want to add to it. What I think is important in the application and sort of judging the applications is the question of fit. And really it comes down to, a graduate experience is a joint experience, both on the side of the student as well as the program. And that program could be a master's program, it could be a PhD program, it could be based on the classes, it could be based on the research. Whatever it is, it's sort of this, it's this joint experience going forward on both sides. And I think the point of the application is that there needs to be this understanding that this experience is beneficial for both sides. And so the experience will be useful to you as a student, and you as a student are going to the program is looking for. And so, as sort of we have here a diversity of programs, each program has its own bent, its own sort of value that it's trying to provide. And, I think part of the application is to make it clear that you have chosen the program appropriate to what is going to be useful for you going forward. And I think the most value that the programs can get from a student is a successful post program career. And so I think that's sort of really where what pulls the application together is being able to say that going through this program, there is an out that is beneficial sort of across the board, and that this program itself is the specific one that will get you to that desired goal state.
Thank you, Professor Mehta. Kind of piggybacking off of that, we do have a couple of questions about related topics. For example, to the faculty and maybe to people who have applied and gotten in, what would you say the faculty are generally looking for when they're applying, and what should students right now do to increase their chance of getting in, maybe with a particular faculty member? So maybe the professors can share what they are particularly looking for in students, and maybe the people who are currently in grad school would like to share what they particularly did to get the attention of the professors that they're currently working with.
Okay, I'll start. In some sense, I'm going to echo Ankur that we're looking for a good fit for a student with our lab. So I'm going to speak first about PhD, because I think that question was mostly aimed at PhD, but I can talk about masters too. Okay, so it depends a little bit on the particular faculty. Everyone has different things they're looking for. Generally, we want people that are bright enough to do the work that we want to do, and that's both a factor of sort of raw intelligence, especially if you're doing something very mathematical or theoretical, you have to have the horsepower to do it, but also bright in terms of just sort of getting it, picking up new topics, aggressively going after knowledge. you want someone who wants to be there, who's motivated to do the work. I don't want to be like breathing down people's neck and twisting them, because if you don't want to be there, it's going to be really painful for both of us. You have to be, I guess, I mean, in some, I don't want to say driven. I mean, driven's kind of the word, but you have to be motivated and a little bit sort of intellectually aggressive. Like, you can't let simple things, barriers get in your way. And that could be, you know, because there's lots of real challenges that will get in your way during a research task. And that, this is true in industry or anything, right? There's lots of real challenges, but the little ones like, oh, I'm not, you know, no one told me what to do, so I just decided not to do something. Or, you know, you have to, you know, there's a certain, you know, I have different types of students I've come across over the years, and sometimes the best students are the ones who really are thinking independently, you know, eventually thinking independently, they're bringing me ideas, there's back and forth. And the ones that are more challenging for me are the ones who are very passive and only do things that they're told to do. And that's very difficult for, you know, I mean, this is a trait in life, right? This is, you realize. Okay, so these are the things we're looking for, but how do we find them? Well, that's the challenge. It's very difficult to find the right students for your group. So, you know, the application basically consists of, you know, GRE scores, which, you know, are kind of helpful. They have to be good enough. It consists of your transcript, which is a little bit better because it's some kind of, you know, integrated measure of your intelligence and your work ethic together. And what's really great are the letters of recommendation, particularly if I want to have someone working in my lab doing research. There's nothing more helpful than a letter from another professor who has had that student in their lab doing research as an undergraduate, which is a reason why undergraduate research is, you know, if you're interested in, you know, even thinking about doing research in grad school, finding a way to do an undergrad research experience in a professor's lab is, you know, probably the best thing. Best thing for you, because you get to see, you know, how the sausage is made and whether this is something you might want to spend the next couple of years doing. It's good for you because you'll get to talk to the grad students and they'll give you all sorts of tips and suggestions and you'll sort of, you know, be in it. Good for you because you learn a lot of things outside your classes, and good for you because you'll get to interact with a professor much more personally than you would in a class. And so when it comes time to ask for letters of recommendation, you know, you'll have a professor who can say something more than, oh, this guy did really good in my class. Instead, you know, the professor might say, oh, well, she was really, you know, motivated and she got this project done, you know, ahead of time and was bringing new ideas, and, you know, maybe she even published a paper or something. So there's you know, it can be a really good thing. And so this weighs a lot. And I would say that, you know, letters matter for the masters also, but proportionally less, because the master's only applications get a little bit less detailed scrutiny. I mean, we really, for the PhD, like, we're, you know, making a financial commitment, and a commitment which we hope is going to be 6 years of our time, or maybe 4. I don't want to say 6 to scare you guys off, but you know, a number of years, shall we say, and we want it to go well. So we really think a lot about this and how much money we have. We have limited funds to make offers to, and so we think a lot about it and try to get the best people. I do want to ask, someone texted me a question. I do want to quickly answer it. Someone says, is it possible to switch? Do you have to know that you want to do PhD? Can you switch from master's only to MS PhD or vice versa? And the answer is yes, sort of. You can come in master's only and use that opportunity to get admitted into the PhD track. And you would do that by basically saying, knocking on professors' doors and saying, hey, I'm here. I'm already paying my own way. I really am super motivated to work in your lab, and you won't have to pay me right now, but I do want you to pay me. And my ultimate goal is to be in your lab in a paid PhD position. And so the professor might say, okay, well, we'll, you know, try you out for a semester or two and see how it goes. And that can be your foot in the door. And there are a number of students who convert that way. In fact, in some areas, I know a lot of the circuits faculty, maybe some of them do this a lot, maybe almost exclusively, especially if there's a lot of students coming in the master's program. In the physical sciences area, which I'm more in, we don't do it as much. Also, students do go for PhD track, and sometimes they get into it and they're like, oh, I don't want to actually, maybe it's not for me. I'm going to get out with a master's. Okay. Can you do it? Absolutely. Look, there's no, you're not signing like a locked in contract. Will your professor be less than happy with you? Yes, but it's not the end of the world, because ultimately we know it's worse to try to force a student to stick in a program they don't want to be in. Will we be a little unhappy if, yes, someone like leaves the lab after 2 years and we paid for them? Yeah, but we also, I mean, if we're reasonable, and most of us are, we say, okay, that's the way the game goes, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So yeah, don't feel like it's, you're locked in one way or the other. I will say you will not get a look. Almost certainly you will not get consideration for financial support from the professor in terms of a research assistant if you're master's only. There are exceptions, I don't want to say 100%, but mostly, we have limited money. We want to invest it in people who are going to be there for longer rather than shorter. So we look for people, who are on a PhD track.
Thank you, Professor Williams. Professor Mehta, if you want to talk about maybe some things that you look for in your.
Sure. So yeah, I think the sort of going back to what we had been discussing, really what I look for is that question of the fit. I think, and to be clear, what we're talking about right now is the PhD program. As sort of we've been discussing, there's many different graduate programs and many different tracks through graduate life that are possible. The question about a PhD program specifically has a lot of these concerns that Ben brought up, that it does come with a considerable resource overhead, both in terms of sort of the money aspect of it, paying salary and stipend, but also time, right? We're deciding on a commitment of several years, and that comes with, our time for supervision and mentorship, our time for getting the money resources and doing that, our time for sort of teaching the things that are necessary to be taught to go through this process. And so that's why I think there's a lot more that goes into deciding on the fit for the PhD program. There are still questions about how do we look at students when it comes to a master's, whether that's a research master's or a class master's. There's different ways of contributing there. But really what we spend the most of our time on when it comes to evaluating candidates as they come across our desk is for the PhD program, or the combined MS PhD program. And I think the easy answer, there was a question in the chat about GRE scores, and that's the easy one. I don't know if I've ever taken a look at a GRE score ever. When I look at an application, the first thing I look at is statement of purpose. The second thing I look at is the letters of recommendation. And if by that point I'm not convinced, I don't think there's anything that a GRE score can or can't do for me. So either and I mean, that goes for everything. GRE scores, oftentimes GPA, pretty much anything, any quantitative numerical value doesn't really hold a lot of water when it comes to deciding, is this somebody that I want to spend the next some number of years, and we won't give a number on that, walking through the next stage of their career. And so, so I think really it comes down to this question of is the student the right fit for my group? And I think this is, this is why I look at the statement of purpose first. It really comes down to, is there, the fit has to go both directions. It is that obviously the student is looking to get a PhD, and there needs to be some reason why a PhD is worthwhile in the career. But there's also the question of, why does that PhD need to come from my lab specifically? There needs to be some understanding of why, like, what am I doing differently than, say, Ben? Why did you put my name on it? Why did you apply to me instead of Ben, instead of somebody at USC or at any other university? Or, why in electrical engineering instead of computer science or mechanical engineering? If there's some thought put into that, then I think that's sort of what I look for. Obviously, all of the answers don't need to be there. Currently, you'll be a student, and then once you get in, you'll continue to be a student instead of an undergrad or graduate student. Part of being a student, in fact, half of being a student is learning. And it's not just learning engineering and technical details, it's learning the answers to these questions as to why am I doing this? What is meaningful to me? What is the mark that I'm gonna leave on the world? So what I look for, not necessarily are complete answers to all those questions, but at least an understanding that you have thought about such questions and you have the beginnings of an answer. And you sort of have a desire to fill out those blanks, to be able to say that part of my objective as a graduate student is to learn what makes me tick, is to know for sure that the PhD that I got is going to translate into meaning for me in the rest of my life. So I think that is really the first thing I look for, and in fact that's the thing that I find is the most indicative of success. I think there's always the question of, are the technical capabilities there? Is the drive and the self-motivation there? Things that come across, as Ben mentioned, from letters of reference, from people who you've worked with in the past, able to vouch for your claims that, yep, this is somebody who did show up and put in the grunt work to make things happen. Looked bleak, as things always will in the course of research. There was still some internal motivation to keep coming and keep plugging away at it. Obviously important. And sort of pulling that all together gives a more complete picture of, what is it like that this experience is going forward. I think there from Alan, I believe, about how med school is a long process. It's many years. Okay, grad school, it's not 15 years, hopefully, but it is still a number of years. And there needs, there's this, it's going to work, Ben mentioned, it's a little bit unfortunate and not the best idea for somebody, or it's not really the most useful outcome if somebody shows up intending to do a PhD and 2 years later decides that the PhD is not right and leaves with a master's. Not least of which because we've committed 2 years of our resources, of our time and our money, but also because that ended up being 2 years of the student's life that perhaps may not have been the best spent. And honestly, I think that's perhaps one of the bigger blows, is that our objective as educators, as mentors, and as supervisors is to lead everybody from where they are now to where they need to be. And of course, sometimes that comes with the idea that, well, in the process, we learn what is right, and it's not what we were doing, and we sort of shift tracks accordingly. The ideal case is that, as we go forward, we are able to narrow in on what is the right, what are the right processes and experiences going forward that we can contribute to and that can help culminate in a successful outcome for everyone. So pulling that all together, I think, to answer the question, pretty much the thing that I look at is the personal statement, to understand what that fit is going to be like, and the letters of reference to understand whether what is somebody else's opinion on this fit.
Thank you, Professor Mehta. That was a very detailed response. I appreciate that. I believe Ethan wanted to say something on the subject, messaged me. If you'd like to speak on maybe how you got into your lab, feel free to share.
One thing I did want to just add really quick. I think what Professor Mehta and Professor Williams said about the idea, I think a good way to summarize Mehta's point there, I think, would be in terms of fit, right? Does this student fit well in my lab? I think that would be a good one word, at least what I took away from that. And from Williams, I think it would be, does this person have that drive, that certain intellectual curiosity and drive that will carry them through the PhD program? And I would just point out that this is exactly what they're looking for at other schools as well, at least at Stanford. So at Stanford, everyone gets admitted into a rotation program, and you spend basically 1 quarter with a different professor, and during that quarter, they're basically evaluating you on those 2 exact points, like I think everything that we spoke about. And if the fit isn't good, if you aren't interested in their research and they're not interested in your research, then you're going to end up having to rotate with a different professor the next quarter. And your funding runs out after 1 year, and so if you can't find someone to like end up doing research with, a lot of students who are originally in the PhD program will just end up dropping down to the master's. And yeah, you leave with the master's, but I think they find that they were missing those 2 qualities that prevented them from finding a professor or research group that they wanted to work with. So,
thank you. I'll open this up to any other current graduate students that want to maybe talk about their current grad school experiences and fitting in with their professor, particularly PhD programs, or maybe someone tried to do a PhD program and didn't like it. Feel free to share.
So I guess I can go. So I'm currently in a PhD program, and I found my lab. I was already working in my lab while I was an undergrad, and so I got in by kind of by chance, where I had met someone, one of the former postdocs in the lab, and we had just started talking, and I mentioned that I was my interest, and then he pointed to his lab, and then afterwards I went, talked to people in the lab, attended a few meetings, and decided I liked some of the work that they were doing, and decided to join. And then afterwards, spending more time there, I realized that I really enjoyed the lab and that this was a lab I wanted to stay in. But if that didn't work, another way to try and find labs that would fit both your interests, as well as you would be also just talking to different graduate students in those certain fields as well, because then they can point you towards what labs to even look at other schools, since a lot of you might not know, unless there's obviously, you can go through papers and conferences to see who some of the major names are in that field, but it definitely helps to talk to people who are currently in that field as well, so that they know they can give you better guidance in terms of finding labs to reach out to, or look into at least.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone else, any other students, want to share their current experience?
I'm going to jump in just because I see some questions bouncing around the chat. I may as well, I can nip some of them in the bud. So someone asked, does the ESAP program come with funding? So just so you know, ESAP is a program, I may not know exact details, but basically if you have a 3.5 GPA, and I can't remember if it's general or maybe it's the 3.5 major GPA, you basically get automatic admission to the master's program at UCLA. So that does not come with funding. That's basically admission to the program. If you are interested in doing research, with a professor or a PhD, then ESAP doesn't really help you. I mean, because, well, if you're interested, you have to go to that professor. And I guess this is something we didn't, I think we're doing breakouts later, and I can go into exquisite detail about the mechanics of how to apply and like strategies and things. But basically, during the application process or right after you're admitted, you want to be contacting professors that you're interested in being in their lab. And sometimes they'll be contacting you, but certainly you can reach out to them and say, let them know you exist. So if you were at UCLA and you got admitted to the ESAP and you were interested in doing the PhD track or doing research, you would still need to approach that professor and say, hey, I'm interested in your lab. Are are there any opportunities for funding?
Thanks for catching that, Professor Williams. I hadn't realized that someone asked that. All right, seeing that it doesn't seem like, it seems like we've exhausted this topic, I wanted to actually kind of change over a little bit to the individuals who didn't do the full PhD track, but instead went on to other different degrees. And more specifically, just in case, if anyone from the audience wants to ask a question, please, as always, feel free to. But the two questions that we have are, what is the application process like for the particular degree that you went for? And how did you decide what schools to apply to for the degrees? And what options were you thinking about when, if you weren't admitted? But seeing as you all were admitted, you probably didn't think too much about that. If anyone would like to take it away, please feel free.
Sure, I can go. Okay, so let's see, the application process for business school is you take the GMAT. You can also apply with a GRE, but GMAT is what's standard across all business schools. They look at primarily your GMAT score, your GPA, and then your work experience. And and then you have 2 letters of recommendations from most schools. And that's the package that you submit and what they look at. When I was considering going back to school, I chose to apply to only the top programs. I was seriously considering if I wanted to go back to school full time or if I wanted to do a fully employed program. And I was actually looking at like Anderson at UCLA allows you to do an MBA in 3 years while you work, instead of 2 years, which is full time. But so I decided that in the first round of applying, I applied to like the top 6 programs. If I got in there, it'd be worth it. And otherwise I would go while I was working. And was there another question in there?
No, I think you got all of it. Thank you very much. I realize that we don't have a lot of business representation, so thank you. If maybe sorry if I say this wrong, the Kuo brothers want to answer about med school? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is Alan. So for medical school, so for medical school, I don't know how it is now. I mean, I imagine it's still competitive, but in medical school, there's a saying that California exports 2 things: med students and oranges. So when you apply to med school, you basically, it's kind of like a shotgun approach. You apply to a lot of med schools and you hope 1 or 2 hits. I got lucky and I was able to stay in California, but it really is, it's medical school application per school. The admission rate is usually around 3%, 2 to 3%. So you have to apply to a lot of them and then hopefully 1 hits. So that's kind of how it is. You have to take the MCAT. When I took it, this is like, let's see, med school, that was like 10 years ago, 11 years ago. It was out of a score of 45. So you have to take the MCAT. Coming from electrical engineering, if you do medical school, there's a lot of classes that you have to take in addition to what we have. Your physics will be covered, your gen chem will be covered, your physics will be covered. You have to do a year of OChem. You also have to do a year of, you have to do some biochem and some OChem labs, and then you have to do a year of life sciences. So on top of your normal electrical engineering stuff, you have to do some more extra things. And then in terms of coming from EE, I think both Frank and I actually think it's actually a pretty big plus. Most med school is filled with biochem majors, psychobio majors, chem majors, bio majors. If they're from engineering, they're usually from bioengineering, not from electrical engineering. So they like to see variety. I mean, because I mean they get so many applications from the traditional pre-med majors that I think when you come from EE, and I think it gives you a leg up. And what else is there? Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Frank, if you have anything to add to that? Take that as a no. Either way, thank you guys. And lastly, Cassie and Mignon, if you guys want to share your experience with particularly EE grad master's programs, as I'm sure there's a lot of people on here that want to hear about that.
My master's applications was kind of anticlimactic, I think. It was very similar to undergrad applications, so I literally just pulled out my undergrad essays and changed a few words and submitted that one. And you take a GRE similar to the SAT, and I think everything else was basically the same.
Sounds great. Cassie, similar experience, or did you find that your application process was a little different?
Pretty similar experience, except that I feel like there were fewer essays that were required, a lot of more short answers. The only big essay was like the statement of purpose, which was pretty easy coming from industry. But I took the GRE while in my senior year of college, and that score lasts for 5 years. And I didn't know when I wanted to apply to grad school, and so I wanted to get the GRE out of the way when I still had some good brain cells and they were active from school. So I took that early on, and then the rest was pretty similar to undergrad applications, like Mignon said. If you have a good relationship with your professors and you can reach back out to them after a few years of not talking to them at all or being on campus, then that's great. Otherwise, you should consider waiting to apply versus applying a little earlier on.
Thank you, Cassie. I did see that there was a question in the chat for Alan. Alan, someone was asking about the workload in medical school and was wondering just about how difficult you would say it is, especially compared to maybe an undergrad EE degree at UCLA.
My opinion for medicine. Oh, you may hear my 3-month-old daughter talking in the back. But my experience for medical school, my mind and also Frank's mind, we're built, I feel like, to be more like engineers. So I personally felt a lot of the medical school stuff is different. I think in engineering, it's very much like whether or not you understand it or not, like all the problem sets, the formulas, and things like that. Medicine, there is a lot more memorization. There's a lot more volume of material. So I think from that standpoint, that was a little bit more challenging because gross anatomy, memorizing the different holes in the skull where nerves go through and Latin names for them was not my thing. So that was a little bit more challenging. But but I would say it is more. But I think it depends on the modality of learning. Some people find logical reasoning, deduction, and problem solving much more enjoyable. Some people going through volumes of information more enjoyable. So because of that, I think engineering I had an easier time than medical school. But medical school, there's a lot of talk about how it's a lot of work, X, Y, and Z. They make medical school entrance, the bar, because so many people want to get in. If you can get into medical school, you'll graduate. I think the graduation rate for most med school is above 99%. Most people that drop out because they realize it wasn't for them. But if you get in, you'll get through. The material, and most med schools nowadays, especially the higher rank ones, are all pass fail, because they know the process of getting in. They don't want people to kill each other in med school. So at least the first 2 years where you do what we call the preclinical years is all pass fail. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's very doable. It's very enjoyable. My most fond memories are actually my med school years.
Actually, I wanted to chime in and say something about PhD, particularly for people who aren't sure or one of the things, I was a little worried about, but I know people also worry about is like, well, okay, it feels like it's going to be a long time, and I'm not going to be, you're not making money, and you're going to be like, working, it's going to be like a ton of work, and you're going to be very poor, and it's going to be really miserable. And I mean, it's half true. I mean, you won't make as much money as even if you're being paid for on a stipend. It's enough to live on, but not a lot. And it is a lot of work. But I would say that and for a lot of my a lot of people, I'll feel the same way. My grad school years were some of the most enjoyable years of my life. And maybe that part of it's just the time in your life, it's your 20s, but you're with a group of people. If you want to be there and you're enjoying your research, yes, it's hard work, yes, it can be frustrating, but you're working on problems that you presumably are interested in, and you get to do it almost, it's the most important thing that you do, you're focused on. You're not balancing budgets or writing proposals or something that I spend my time doing now. And you spend a lot of time with other people in grad school, and so your friends, you're all kind of you all kind of are in the same boat. No one has like tons of money, and so it's not so grim. I mean, I feel like some people, they ask me questions and they feel like PhD sounds really grim, and it's really not. If you find a good lab and you have a group of people that you hang out with, it can really be a very enjoyable thing if you're if the research is what you're interested in and you want to do. And then you have plenty of chance to make money afterwards. Does that mean if making money is your top priority, is getting the PhD the fastest route there? It is not. You can do very well with a PhD, but there are faster ways to, if you go into some other line, finance or something. So.
Thank you. Good to hear that it's not all going to be downs going forward. All right. So right now, we're actually going to split up into breakout rooms. Although, Professor Mehta, do you have something quickly to add to what Professor Williams said? Maybe not. We're going to quickly split into breakout rooms. And